I walked into my parents' kitchen expecting pot roast. What I got was a front row seat to my own replacement. My husband was on a stool at the counter, knees turned toward my little sister like they'd been glued that way. On her wrist was a thin gold bracelet with a clasp I'd know blind. He told me he lost that bracelet 2 months ago. He cried about it. Actual tears. My name is Rachel Smith. I'm 34. I work risk review for an insurance group in Cleveland. I get paid to catch the lie hiding inside the paperwork before it costs somebody everything. I'm good at my job. I did not see this coming in my own house. I'd driven over with my daughter Eve, 7 years old, buckled in the back seat, singing along to the radio, no idea her whole world was about to tilt. My husband, Jude, told me that morning he had a work thing and would meet us there. My mom, Estelle, had called the day before, weirdly specific, telling me to bring Eve and not be late. I figured it was just her usual nerves about hosting. The second I walked in, the house felt wrong. No noise, no TV, no smell of anything cooking. Just my dad, Arthur, standing at the head of the island with his hands flat on the counter, like he was about to announce layoffs. I sent Eve to the sunroom with her crayons and told her I'd be right back. Then I walked into the kitchen and understood I'd been set up. Jude and Megan were sitting close. My mom was scrubbing a dish that was already clean, not looking at me. My dad cleared his throat in that voice he uses right before bad news dressed up as good sense. "Rachel," he said, "we wanted to handle this as a family, together." Jude reached across the counter like he wanted to take my hand. "We didn't plan this," he said. "It just happened. We tried to fight it." Megan touched the bracelet on her wrist, my bracelet, like it was a comfort object. "It was real feelings, Tess," she said. "We couldn't help it." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to lose it, to defend me the way a mother's supposed to. Instead, she set the dish down, wiped her hands, and wouldn't even look at my face. "You're a mother now," she said. "Don't put Eve through a broken home over this. The stronger woman is the one who lets things go." That's when it landed. This wasn't a confession, it was a script. They'd already built the new arrangement, Jude and Megan together, my parents smoothing it over, and they'd saved exactly one part in it for me, the one who stays quiet and swallows it. They wanted tears. They wanted me to scream, throw something, give them a reason to call me the unstable one. I didn't give them anything. I walked to the sunroom, picked up my daughter's jacket, and said, "Come on, baby, we're leaving." "But Grandma said pie," Eve said. "We're getting ice cream instead." I carried her out through that kitchen, past 4 people who suddenly had nothing to say, and I didn't look back once. The drive home was 22 minutes. I counted every one of them because it was the only way to keep my brain from coming apart at the seams. Eve hummed a song from music class the whole way, staring out the window, completely unaware. I made her dinner like it was any other night, buttered pasta, her favorite. I sat with her on the living room floor and helped her stick foil stars on her astronomy notebook. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't crack when I told her how far away Jupiter is. At 8:30, I put her to bed, read her a chapter, kissed her forehead, closed the door. Then I stood alone in my kitchen and made a decision that had nothing to do with lawyers or money or getting even. I wasn't going to fight for that marriage. I wasn't going to fight my parents for their approval. I wasn't going to scream, post about it, or explain myself to anybody who already knew and let it happen anyway. I was going to go quiet, cut it clean, build something they'd never get a seat in. They thought I'd beg. They forgot I don't negotiate with people who already decided I was disposable. I sat in that dark kitchen a long time, listening to the fridge hum, thinking about the way my mother wouldn't look at me, the way Megan touched that bracelet like she'd earned it, the way my dad's voice never once cracked. None of them were sorry. They were relieved the secret was finally out in a room they controlled, on their terms, with me expected to play the part they picked. I wasn't playing it. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I just knew the woman who walked into that house wanting an apology wasn't the same one who walked out of it. Something in me had gone still and cold and certain. They have no idea what's coming. Honestly, neither did I. Not fully, not yet. 3 days after that kitchen, my phone had 41 missed notifications and I hadn't answered one. I'm not a person who explodes. I never have been. When something breaks at work, I don't yell at the vendor. I just quietly stop sending them business. That's what I did with my family. No fight, no confrontation. I just started closing doors, one at a time. So quiet, they didn't even hear the click. First was the group chat. Estelle, Arthur, Megan, me, a thread called Family that had been running for 6 years, mostly recipes and photos of Eve. I left it without a word. Estelle texted me directly within 10 minutes. "Rachel, why did you leave the chat? We need to talk about this like adults." I read it and put the phone face down on the counter. Second was Jude. He was still living in the house. We hadn't sorted out logistics yet, and I wasn't in a rush to. But I moved my things into the guest room and started treating him like a roommate I didn't like. Not cold enough to start a war, just distant enough that he couldn't say I was the unreasonable one. He tried talking to me twice that week. Both times I said I had nothing to say to him yet, and went back to whatever I was doing. He didn't know what to do with that. Jude likes a fight. A fight means he gets to perform remorse, get forgiven, reset the clock. Silence doesn't give him anything to work with. What surprised me was how fast the two of them got comfortable. Less than a week after that lunch, a cousin sent me a photo from her page. Megan had posted a picture of her and Jude at a coffee shop downtown, her hand on his arm, some caption about being grateful for real love, whatever that means, not even hiding it anymore. They'd decided the hard part, the getting caught part, was already behind them, and now it was just a matter of waiting for me to come around. I didn't comment. I didn't call anybody about it. I just took a screenshot, put it in a folder on my laptop I hadn't given a name to yet, and closed it. At work, nobody could tell anything had happened. I ran my numbers, caught 2 flagged claims that would have cost the company real money, sat through a budget meeting, and didn't check my phone once. It was the only place that still felt like mine. The thing that actually cracked me a little wasn't Jude, or Megan, or even my mother's increasingly frantic texts. It was small. It was Eve. We were at the kitchen table on a Thursday night, her doing homework, me going through mail I hadn't opened in 4 days. She was working on a worksheet about family trees, little boxes you fill in with names, and she looked up at me with a pencil in her hand and asked very casually, the way kids ask things that aren't casual at all, "Mom, why does Aunt Megan sleep over at Grandma's a lot now?" I kept my face still. "I don't know, baby," I said. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, went back to her worksheet like it was nothing. "Because last time we went there, she came out of Daddy's old room in the morning. I saw her hair was messy. I thought maybe she just doesn't like the guest bed." I sat there for a second, holding a piece of junk mail I wasn't reading anymore, doing math in my head. Last time we went there, which meant this wasn't new. This wasn't a mess that started the week I caught them. Eve had seen something weeks ago in my parents' house, under my parents' roof, and she'd filed it away the way kids do, without understanding what it meant, and it had just been sitting in her, waiting for the right worksheet to shake it loose. I asked her, as gently as I could, when exactly that was. She thought about it, the way 7-year-olds think about time, in a vague fog of before summer and after Willa's birthday party. It didn't matter that she couldn't pin the date. What mattered was the number of times. She said last time, like there'd been others. I told her that was probably nothing, sweetie. Grown-ups sleep in weird places sometimes. And she believed me instantly and went back to filling in her family tree, drawing a little heart next to my box and a heart next to her own, and left Jude's box blank because she couldn't decide what color to use. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was shocked, I wasn't really, not after the bracelet and the lunch and the way none of them could look at me straight. What kept me up was simpler and colder than shock. It was arithmetic. If Eve had seen this weeks ago in my parents' house, under my parents' roof, that meant my mother hadn't just found out and panicked into bad decisions. She'd known. She'd let it happen under her own roof, around my daughter, and still called me the day before that lunch to make sure I brought Eve along, like a prop for the show. They weren't protecting the family, they were protecting themselves, and they were willing to use my kid as cover to do it. I sat on the edge of my bed a long time that night, and for the first time since the kitchen, I didn't feel cold anymore. I felt something sharper than that, something with an edge to it, and I understood that going quiet didn't mean doing nothing. It meant deciding carefully exactly what I was going to take away from every single one of them. My mother finally got me on the phone on a Sunday morning, 11 days after that lunch. I only picked up because she called from a number I didn't recognize, and some old habit in me still checks unknown numbers in case it's Eve's school. "Rachel, thank God," she said, her voice already climbing. "We need to sit down as a family. This silence isn't healthy. You're punishing all of us for something that isn't even that complicated." I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and didn't say anything for a second. "Not complicated," I repeated. "People make mistakes," she said. "Your sister is going through something, Jude is going through something, you're going through something too, I know that, but freezing everyone out isn't going to fix it. Families go through hard seasons. This is a hard season." "A hard season," I said. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Rachel, don't be like this." "I want you to hear me say this once," I told her, "and I want you to actually listen because I'm only going to say it one time. You don't get to see Eve. Not this week, not next month, not until I decide otherwise, and I don't know when that'll be. Maybe never." The line went quiet for a second, and then she started up again, faster now, higher. "You cannot do that. I am her grandmother. Arthur and I have rights. You can't just cut a child off from her family because you're angry at me." "I'm not angry," I said, which wasn't fully true, but it was true enough for the point I needed to make. "I'm done. Those aren't the same thing." She tried 3 more times to get a reaction out of me. She brought up how much they'd done for Eve, the birthday parties, the babysitting, the college fund they'd started when she was a baby. She brought up loyalty, blood, how a real daughter doesn't do this to her own mother. Somewhere in the middle of it, she started crying, the kind of crying that comes on fast and convenient, and I recognized it because I'd seen her do it before, at Christmas, at Megan's college graduation, anytime she needed a room to feel sorry for her instead of asking hard questions about what she'd actually done. I let her finish. Then I said, you knew before that lunch, and you still had me bring my daughter into that house so you could stage the whole thing like an intervention. That's not a hard season, Mom. That's a choice you made, and I'm making mine." I hung up before she could answer. My father called 20 minutes later. Arthur doesn't do tears. He does authority, the same flat, reasonable voice he used at that kitchen island, like he was chairing a meeting instead of talking to his own daughter. "You're being extreme," he said. "No hello, nothing. This family has survived worse than an affair. Your grandmother had one, did you know that? We didn't blow up the whole tree over it." "Good for her," I said. "Rachel." "I'm not blowing up a tree," I said. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just done including you. There's a difference, and if you think about it long enough, you'll understand it." He didn't like that. He told me I was being cruel, that cutting off grandparents was the kind of thing that damages a child more than any divorce ever could, that I'd regret this in 10 years when Eve asked why she didn't grow up close to her grandparents. I let him talk. I'd heard enough lectures from that man across enough kitchen tables to know that arguing back just gives him more material. When he finally ran out of things to say, I told him the same thing I told my mother. No access. Not now. Maybe not ever. And I hung up. I want to say I felt some huge release after that, some door slamming shut with a satisfying bang, but it wasn't like that. It just felt like closing a tab, quiet, a little sad, honestly, in a place I wasn't expecting to feel anything at all. These were still my parents. I still remembered my dad teaching me to drive in an empty parking lot, my mom sitting up with me the night before my first big work presentation, going over my talking points like they mattered to her more than sleep. That version of them was real once. It just wasn't the version that showed up in that kitchen. I put the phone in a drawer and didn't look at it for the rest of the day. Monday morning, back at my desk, trying to lose myself in a stack of claims files, I got an email that had nothing to do with any of it. A recruiter, a firm out of Denver, reaching out because someone had passed along my name for a regional risk director role. Bigger scope, better pay, and 1,100 miles between me and everyone who thought they still had a say in my life. I almost deleted it. I'd gotten recruiter emails before and ignored most of them out of loyalty to a life I thought I still wanted to keep. I didn't delete this one. I sat there staring at the subject line for a long time, thinking about Eve's family tree worksheet, the blank box she'd left for Jude, and the heart she'd drawn next to mine. Then I opened the email and started typing a reply.
Standing in the kitchen we used to share like it belonged to both of us. It didn't feel like that anymore. It felt like a rental I was already checking out of. "I got a job in Denver," I said. "I'm taking it. Eve and I are moving." He put his fork down slow, like he needed the extra second to figure out what face to make. "You can't just decide that," he said. "She's my daughter, too." "You didn't act like it was your daughter's house when you were sneaking my sister into your old bedroom at my parents' place," I said. I hadn't planned to say it that flat, that fast, but it came out anyway, and once it was out, I didn't feel like taking it back. His face went through about 4 different expressions before he landed on angry. "That's not," he started, then stopped because there wasn't really a way to finish that sentence that didn't make it worse. "I'm not asking you," I said. "I'm telling you. I already signed a lease. I start in 3 weeks. He tried the reasonable voice next, the one he probably used on clients when a deal was falling apart. "Let's talk about this like adults, Rachel. You're allowed to be upset with me, but taking her across the country, that's not about us anymore. That affects her whole life." "Funny," I said. "That's the same thing my mother told me on the phone last week, word for word almost." He didn't have an answer for that. Over the next 3 weeks, I packed our lives into boxes with a kind of focus I usually save for closing out a claims file. Eve's room first, because I wanted her to feel like her stuff mattered most. Then the kitchen, then the parts of the house that used to feel like mine and now just felt like evidence. Jude hovered around some nights, trying different angles. Guilt, then anger, then one night, sitting on the stairs while I taped up a box of Eve's books, something that might have actually been close to real sadness. He asked me if there was any version of this where I didn't take her so far away. I told him the truth. There might have been, a month ago, if things had gone differently. They didn't. Word got back to my parents faster than I expected. Estelle showed up at the house 2 days before the movers came. No call first, just standing on the porch when I opened the door with a box in my hands. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just stopped needing her to look big. "You're really doing this?" she said. "Taking my granddaughter to Colorado like we don't exist?" "You made that decision, not me. I just didn't fight you on it." She stood there a second, like she was waiting for the script to keep going the way it always had, waiting for me to soften, apologize for making her feel bad, invite her in for coffee so we could talk it out. When none of that came, something in her face changed, like she was finally getting it, and it still didn't stop her from trying one more angle. "What am I supposed to tell people?" she said. "That my daughter just disappeared with my grandbaby?" "Tell them whatever makes you feel better," I said. I closed the door before she could answer, and I stood in the hallway for a minute with my back against it, waiting to feel something bigger than what I actually felt, which was mostly just tired. The last night in that house, Jude asked to say goodbye to Eve alone in her room. I let him because whatever he was, I wasn't going to be the reason she remembered her last night in that house as a fight instead of a quiet, ordinary bedtime.
I stood in the hallway and heard pieces of it through the door. Him telling her he loved her asking if he was going to visit, him saying something I couldn't quite catch that made his voice crack a little. I felt nothing watching it. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, just distance, like watching a scene from a show I used to be in and wasn't anymore. He found me in the kitchen after, box of her stuffed animals in his hands like he didn't know where else to put himself. You really think this fixes anything? Running? I'm not running. I'm building something you're not going to be inside of. That's different than running. Running is what you and Megan did in my parents' guest room for months, while I brought home a paycheck and packed your suitcases for trips that weren't real. He didn't say anything to that. He just set the box down and left, and that was the last real conversation we had in that house. The movers came at 8 the next morning. By noon, the house was empty, echoing in that specific way empty houses do, like it already forgot us. I did one last walkthrough, mostly out of habit, checking closets and cabinets, and in the back of the hallway closet, behind a stack of old coats nobody wore anymore, I found a shoebox that wasn't mine. I almost left it. I was tired and the movers were waiting, and I didn't want one more piece of this life following me to Colorado. But something made me open it anyway, right there on the closet floor, and what was inside wasn't money or a lease or anything I expected. It was a stack of photographs, older than I thought anything between them could be, dated on the back in Megan's handwriting, and the earliest date on that stack was almost 2 years before that Sunday lunch. I sat on the floor of that empty hallway a long time, holding that box, doing math I didn't want to do. I didn't call anyone about the shoebox. Not Jude, not my parents, not even a lawyer. I thought about it for exactly one night, sitting on the floor of a mostly empty apartment in Denver with Eve asleep in the next room, going through those photos one more time. 2 years, longer than I'd let myself imagine, even after everything. In the end, I put the lid back on, taped it shut, and put it on the top shelf of a closet where I wouldn't have to look at it every day. Not because I forgave anything, because I understood, finally, that digging deeper into exactly how long they'd lied wasn't going to change what I was already doing. It would just keep me tied to them a little longer, and I was done being tied to them. Denver in October is colder than I expected, that thin, dry cold that gets into your hands before you notice it. Eve hated it for about a week, then discovered you could see your breath in the mornings and decided it was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She started collecting rocks from a trail near our new place with a girl named Natalie's daughter, who lived 2 doors down and had the same gap-toothed laugh Eve did before she lost her first tooth. Natalie and I met at pickup, both of us standing off to the side of the other parents, both of us clearly new to this particular playground's social order. She didn't ask why we'd moved from Ohio, didn't ask where Eve's dad was, didn't do that thing people do where they're fishing for the sad backstory so they can decide how to feel about you. She just offered me a coffee from her thermos on a cold morning and made a joke about the crossing guard taking his job way too seriously, and that was it. That was the whole foundation of it. Easy. My new job kept me busy in a way that felt good instead of hollow. Bigger scope, harder problems, nobody in that office who'd ever met Jude or Megan or my parents, nobody who looked at me like a story instead of a person. I flagged a coverage gap in my 3rd week that saved the firm real money, and my director told me in front of the whole team that hiring me was the smartest call he'd made all year. I drove home that night with the windows cracked, cold air coming in, and realized I hadn't thought about that kitchen in Cleveland in almost 4 days straight. That was new. Jude called sometimes, in the beginning, more than I answered. The calls got shorter each time and eventually mostly stopped, drifting down to a birthday text, a Christmas text, nothing that asked anything of me. My parents tried harder for a while. Estelle sent letters.
actual paper letters, which felt like something out of another era, full of the same lines about family and forgiveness and how Eve would grow up not knowing her grandparents. I read the first two. I stopped opening the rest. The thing nobody warns you about when you're the one who gets to walk away clean is that revenge doesn't feel like you think it will. I used to imagine in the weeks right after that lunch some version of the future where I stood in front of all of them and watched their faces fall apart as they realized what they'd lost. I don't get that. I don't think about them enough anymore for that scene to even play out in my head. What I get instead is smaller and quieter and somehow bigger than that fantasy ever was. It's Eve, 4 months into our new life, sitting at the kitchen table doing another one of those family tree worksheets, except this one's for a different class, a different year, and when she gets to the box for grandparents, she just leaves it blank without asking me a single question about it at all. Not sad, not confused, just blank. Like it's a box that doesn't apply to her life right now, the same way you'd leave a box blank for a country you've never lived in. I watched her do that from across the kitchen, and I had to turn around and busy myself with the dishes for a minute because that blank box did something to me that 4 months of silence from my parents never managed to do. She's not carrying them. That's the whole thing. That's the entire outcome I was working toward, even when I didn't have words for it yet, standing in that kitchen in Cleveland with a box of crayons in my hand. I wanted her to grow up not carrying the weight of people who were willing to use her as a prop in their own excuse-making. I didn't need a courtroom for that. I didn't need to ruin anybody publicly or drain a bank account or win some big dramatic fight. I just needed to take her somewhere clean and let enough time pass. Some nights, I still think about that kitchen island, my father's hands flat on the counter, my mother scrubbing a dish that didn't need it, Megan's hand on that bracelet like it belonged to her. I think about it less than I used to, and when I do think about it, it feels like something that happened to someone else, a story I heard once instead of a life I lived. Last week, Eve asked me out of nowhere while we were driving home from her soccer practice if we were ever going to visit Ohio again. I told her probably not anytime soon and asked her if that made her sad. She thought about it for a second, watching the mountains go by out the window, and said, "Not really. I like it better here." Me too, I told her, and I meant it more than I've meant almost anything. That's it. That's the whole revenge. Not a single confrontation, not a single dollar taken from anybody, not a single scene where they get to see me win, just a life built somewhere they don't get to reach, steady enough that a 7-year-old can leave their names out of a worksheet and not even notice the space where they used to be.